first, and we'll get started here. And Director Krambik, could you do roll call, please?
Yes. Gorham?
Here.
Callarus? Yeager?
Yes.
Erickson?
Here.
Marone? Woodward?
Here.
Duval?
Present. All right. So with that, is there a member that would care to help or lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening?
Evan?
I will. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And now I'm looking for amendments or approval of the agenda for tonight's meeting.
So move, Erickson.
Second, Gorham.
Quorum, any discussion? Hearing none. Director Krambik, could you do roll call, please?
Yes. Gorham?
Here.
Callarus? Yeager?
Yep.
Erickson?
Yes.
Marone? Woodward?
Here.
Duval?
And aye on that one. So, Brent, do we have anyone online at this moment in time?
We do. We have Brian Bion, or Bion.
Okay. And we do not have Mr. Marone, Commissioner Marone online. All right. Well,
Do we still need to do?
yeah, that's where I'm at. I think we'll, at the point at which Mr. Rome joins us, we will do roll call. Otherwise, I think we'll just do voice vote here for the time being. So with that, item 5, we're looking for approval of minutes from the regular meeting held on August 17th, 2022, and the workshop held on September 7th, 2022.
Move to approve, Erickson.
Motion by Erickson. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Woodward, second. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. We are rolling along to new business. We are at new business 6A. We have an interim use permit request for outdoor storage at 1918 TC Drive. Director Krambik, can you set that up for us, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. There's two properties that we'll be looking at tonight within the Brainerd Industrial Park, property owned by the city of Brainerd. So the EDA, just to give a little context to this, has been working with VCV on the land sale of two industrial park properties for the purpose of crypto mining. At the last EDA meeting, the land was conveyed to VCV. To my understanding, however, a final purchase agreement has not yet occurred as they are still working on a few documents. So with this interim use permit, Jerry Tang has submitted a request on behalf of VCV Digital Infrastructure Minnesota for an interim use permit for outdoor storage as a principal use to operate a crypto mining facility at 1918 TC Drive. The applicant proposes operating a crypto mining facility with 12 containers to house the data mining machines, along with 12 cooling towers. Each one of those would be next to one of the data mining machines. And these would be set on concrete pads. Those documents were included in the packet. So the primary use of the site is outdoor storage. So any subsequent buildings are essentially accessory to the crypto mining operation. So this site in particular would also have an office building that was included in the packet as well with the specifications on it, and a guard shack beyond the fence. So the table of use permits the operation of outdoor storage as a primary use as an interim use in the general industrial district, as long as it meets the criteria outlined in section 515-3-28.c, regulating outdoor storage. So Brent, if you could please pull up the site map for this proposed crypto mining facility. So one of the first stipulations with outdoor storage as principal use is essentially all exterior storage shall be screened as not to be visible from abutting properties and rights of way, which would include TC Drive. All outdoor storage shall also follow standards established in the screening of parking lots. So the applicant is proposing around the entire property an 8-foot tall chain link fence They do want barbed wire around the top of it, which does require an 8-foot height. And then they are proposing privacy slats along the north side of the fence to screen the outdoor storage from the road. So because this fence is essentially non-opaque with the privacy slats, which would fully screen the outdoor storage, and because there's barbed wire on the top of it, the fence must be located essentially at the front property line. It can't be any closer, or at the required setback for the general industrial district, which is 40 feet. So part of this as well, of our parking lot landscape ordinance, chain link fences with slats do not meet the landscape screening requirements of that part of it. Really the slats are for the purpose of fully screening the outdoor storage. So there was also a requirement essentially for one shrub to be planted for every 5 lineal feet. So the applicant has shown that in the proposed site plan as well. So if you can maybe scroll down, Brent, you maybe see the shrubs in the proposed surveyed site plan. One other thing to note as well, there'll be a driveway and parking area associated with these will be are required to be paved with asphalt. Then just wanted to point out a few things. Criteria for granting conditional use permits. So one of those conditions is the proposed use shall be site-oriented in landscape to produce a harmonious relationship with buildings and grounds to adjacent buildings and other properties. The proposed crypto mining facility will be fully screened from the road with a chain link fence with privacy slats. And the fence will have a row of shrubs planted along the roadside for screening purposes as well to help soften that fence. The proposed use shall produce a total visual impression and of the environment, which is consistent with the environment of the neighborhood. So there are many other examples of industrial properties with chain link fences. Just down the road is the FedEx building in the industrial park property. That also has a very large and long chain link fence with barbed wire at the top of it. Another criteria would be looking at the comprehensive plan and the goals of the comprehensive plan. Staff believes it supports Goal 1 of Chapter 5 of the comprehensive plan, which states support infill and redevelopment through Brainerd as a strategic component of growth. So Policy 1 under Goal 1 states drive infill development and redevelopment towards areas where current infrastructure is present, which current infrastructure is present on TC Drive. Or places where high levels of blight or disinvestment exist, not part of that part of it, but towards area where infrastructure is present. So staff recommends approval of the interim use permit for outdoor storage as a principal use for crypto mining facility with the following conditions. The interim use permit is contingent upon final sale of the industrial park property to VCV and is voided upon operations discontinuing as a crypto mining facility. With that, I'll open it up to questions from the Planning Commission. I believe the applicant was going to try to be online as well.
Thank you, James. Are there questions of staff or points of clarity regarding the proposal here before we move forward? Mr. Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, yeah, one question. I'm sure it's in here on the diagrams, but I couldn't determine the height of the cooling towers. Can you elucidate me on that? Again, there's diagrams in here, but I was looking for the height of them and I couldn't find it.
Let me take a look. Brent, is there anybody online?
Yes, we have Jerry online.
So he may be able to, Jerry, if you're available, are you able to answer that question?
Is he going to need to star 6 to unmute? Do we have him?
Like I said, perhaps it's on there, but I wasn't able to determine it.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, sorry, my internet dropped off a little bit. I just redialed in. Sorry about that.
So,
I think it's 156 if I'm, but
is this, are we speaking with Jerry Tang?
Yes,
Yes,
this is
Jerry.
Jerry.
Jerry, we have a question that's been raised about the height of the cooling towers on the proposed site. Do you have that information, or can you inform us on that?
Yes, we do. Just 1 second. I have that. James, you don't have that document, do you? Or
It does look like it may be indicating a width. It does have a height as well here. It says 3984.
I think the inches is underneath, but I could be.
oh, the height, I got it now. The height of the cooling tower is 40 to 86 millimeters. So that's translating into, hold on, how many feet?
Top left page, yeah. That's
2 feet.
So,
Looks like it's 14 feet.
okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Tang.
Yeah.
So, other questions of staff at this point in time? Hearing none, we will open public hearing at 6:11. And at this point, maybe invite Mr. Tang, if you could maybe talk to us about your proposal here. We've already read the general aspects of it. If there are aspects that you would like to highlight for our attention as we consider your interim use permit at 1918 TC Drive.
Sure. Thanks, board members, and nice to meet you, everyone. Yes, the goal is to establish a cryptocurrency mining center here. I think it's probably very beneficial to the BPU as they can amortize the capex they invested in the substation. And for us, I think Brainerd has been very friendly in collaborating with us to design the site. We hired a professional electrical engineering firm to come up with a site layout to ensure safety and complying with the codes. And we plan to hire about 12 to 15 employees for this site. These will be full-time employees, probably with the annual compensation in the 60 to 80,000 range. And we plan to be here long-term, and if BPU plan to give us more capacity, we'll be more than happy to expand in Brainerd.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Tang. Are there questions of the applicant by the commission?
I have a question.
Yes, Mr. Gorham, please.
Mr. Tang, are you familiar with something called the merge that's happening right now?
Yes, I am.
And to me, that makes me so much more optimistic about the whole Bitcoin industry. Is that we're moving? What it involves is right now, where it's proof of work. That's how you verify what you're doing, if I understand that right. And what the merge is about is moving it to proof of stake. And the point of doing this is that you can reduce the energy capacity by 99%. Do you think this is something that's going to change the Bitcoin mining industry?
That's a great question. Yes, Ethereum has finally made the move to POS. I think that's a historic event for crypto space. For Bitcoin, I believe short term is probably not gonna transition into POS, and that's proof of stake. However, I guess depends on how Ethereum, performs under the POS framework. There might be a possibility in the future for Bitcoin community to consider a transition. I think it's a possibility, Ms. Grum.
Thank you.
I wouldn't say definitively.
Do you struggle with the ethics ever of using so much consumption of energy to produce wealth?
Well, I guess that's a trust.
These are big questions. I
It's
understand.
a large question. It's probably beyond. I wish I'm a philosopher and politician, but I think the way I look at it is there are many uses of energy. Again, just you can interrupt me if I'm offending anyone. There are many uses of energy that may not be productive, right? If you believe, I don't want to even list examples. Like if you don't believe playing game is beneficial to the society or watching, I don't know, binge watch YouTube is beneficial. If I'm a believer in Bitcoin, I can make the same point against other usage of energy, right? But I guess here what I see is I do believe Bitcoin does provide an alternative for, I guess, store of value. And that's a big argument for Bitcoin as a digital gold, right? Quote unquote digital gold. So I really believe in that. And I think it's going to benefit us and the society in the future. And I think the U.S. as a country is going to benefit tremendously just because we have the most energy, I guess, excess energy in the world, and we have the cheapest energy in the world. So we are going to capture most of the Bitcoin mining. And that really means we have all the printers in the U.S. That's important.
I appreciate. Yeah, I just want to say I appreciate your answer. I think it's an illusion sometimes that energy is so cheap if we don't consider the consequences of heating a planet. But I appreciate your answer. Very thoughtful. I appreciate it. And thank you very much.
Thank you. I would like to spend more time talking to you about this topic.
Another time.
Yes.
Other questions of the applicant? Mr. Tang, can you tell me, maybe if we look at both sites together here, how many people are we talking about employing to operate this facility or this operation at these two sites?
It will be between 12 to 15. We don't have a precise number yet. These are permanent employees, not counting any, obviously, construction workers, which we think maybe at a peak we'll have 20 to 30 workers on site.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the commission for the applicant?
Mr. Chair, this is Chuck
Yes.
Marone. Can you hear me?
Who do I have, please? Mr. Marone.
This is Chuck.
Welcome. Welcome.
Yeah. Hey, thank you.
So you've joined us here, so do you have questions of the applicant or staff on this, as we're now at public hearing if you've arrived late here?
No, I've been here for a while.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
My question really goes to the interim nature of this use. And, just thinking about the city long term, I would like to know from the applicant and or from the staff, what happens if this use is no longer viable? I know with electronics equipment, it gets dated rather quickly. I don't know about the permanence of these structures. It seems to me like, what we're putting in here as an interim use is a single use that wouldn't necessarily be reusable as something else. And so I'm wondering, what does the permanence of this look like? If in 5 years this is no more, what happens to the site? And do we need some type of financial security to ensure that this site can be, in a sense, reconditioned and reused if we find out at some point that this interim use is no longer viable? That's my question.
Thanks, Chuck. I'm going to direct that first to Director Krambik, and then we'll ask Mr. Tang to follow up as well. James?
Yeah, so and Jerry Tang could maybe answer this as well, but I believe most likely the actual data mining machines and cooling towers would probably be removed. In place of that, those are on fairly large concrete pads to be able to support some of the weight of that. So those would probably be left behind as the foundation of that, as well as the asphalt road that goes in there, as well as the fence. So, you would have a site that, may be a little bit more difficult to redevelop with the concrete pads there.
And I think I heard an element of Mr. Marone's question that was almost sort of the reclamation, almost like mineral mining in a way, the reclamation bond or something like that that would help to restore. Is that, do you have a comment on that? Or
That's something I'd probably have to check with the city attorney on.
So maybe at this point, Mr. Tang, would you be able to offer your perspectives on the questions that were raised about sort of the longevity of the site and how it would be reclaimed and how that would be financed?
Sure. I guess to answer the question, the Bitcoin mining business, I think would have lost probably more than 5 years. It has been around for, at this point, 13 years. And the end of the mining, I guess the reward for Bitcoin mining is 2141, which is well over 100 years away from today. And we think as a viable business, it will last for decades if the thesis of Bitcoin as a digital gold is going to stand. It is a long-term business. In terms of the structure on the site, I think Ms. Marone, I think is very sharp to recognize that the electronic devices they can become outdated, like computers, right? Apple iPhones get updated every few years. The storage units, these are standardized 20 by 8 feet containers that can house the new types of machines. So I believe the containers can be reused. So are the cooling towers. What's going to change is going to be the computers inside. And in terms of in a scenario where if you were to remove the containers, James was right on. There will be concrete slabs. There will be asphalt. That could be an issue if you were to construct warehouses. However, I think the concrete pads, I think you can reuse them, right? If you build a new warehouse, and these concrete pads are going to be highly engineered because they need to support very heavy weights. So I believe you can fill in the blanks with new, I guess, on the areas that do not have concrete pads today, you can just fill in new concrete pads to support a warehouse. That would minimize any reclamation cost. But we don't, again, we will own the land. We don't plan to return this to the city. So I think that's in my mind, a low probability event.
Thank you, Mr. Tang. Mr. Marone, I cannot see you, so I'm just checking in if you had a follow-up to that. I can't read body language over the wire.
I appreciate that. I will jump in if I have something, but otherwise I'll just stay mute and you don't have to check on me.
Very good.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions of the applicant? Okay, hearing none, then, is there anyone here in the audience that would care to speak on the application for an interim use permit before us this evening? And is there anyone online that would care to speak to this issue? And if online users, if you were to use *3 to raise your hand to signal that you want to speak, and then *6 to unmute. Again, is there anyone else present that would care to speak to this interim use permit before us this evening? All right, well, hearing none, I think we'll close the public hearing at 6:25 and bring this back to the commission for discussion. Anyone have discussion on this particular project?
Got a question for James, if I might.
Yeah, Mr. Erickson.
So the nature of using an interim use permit, is there, and I didn't, if it's in here, I missed it, is there a time frame associated with this permit, proposed permit?
I did not recommend putting a time frame on this one, but I did recommend as a condition on there, the interim use permit is contingent upon final sale of the industrial park property, and it is voided upon operations discontinuing as a crypto mining facility.
Sure, thanks.
I have a couple of points on this. Number one, I think it's a horrible project for our city, and I think it compromises our future energy independence and sustainability. When I look at 16 employees for combined 50 megawatts of power, that's a tremendous amount of energy. You know, I looked at the 5 homes that I own in the city here, and I look at my energy demand, and it's anywhere from 6 to 10 kilowatts of power is my peak demand, not 50 megawatts. So there's, you know, if my homes are typical of other homes in Brainerd, that energy demand is the equivalent to 5,000 houses in our city. And that is a lot of power, and it's grabbing up, I think, a lot of the energy that we may need, as we are probably in the very near future going to be moving more towards electrified transportation. And so what happens when I plug in my electric car in my garage, and that's going to add maybe twice as much demand to my house, and it sums up, and we're going to really compromise our energy ability. Right now, we have a tremendous clean energy generating facility at the Brainerd Dam, and the price of dirty energy is very likely going to go up tremendously. And these aren't just my concerns; these are the concerns of the citizens of the city of Brainerd that developed our comprehensive plan. And they raise a couple of key points in here. Under Economic Development, Goal 3, Number 2, our plan says attract new businesses best suited for the community's assets, increasing local employment options, and building the city's tax base. 16 jobs is not really increasing our local employment. Under Facilities and Infrastructure, we have 2 goals or 2 policies under Goal 3. One is to ensure adequate water power supply to meet the long-term needs of the community. And the other is to steer city development to energy and resource conservation by promoting renewable energy e-resources, protecting our water supply, and leveraging the hydroelectric dam. And I am just blown away at the amount of energy that this project would consume. It's in direct contradiction to the goals of our comprehensive plan. If you want to think about the number of jobs we can get, well, we can get basically a third of a person per megawatt of power. That's not a lot. Wouldn't we want to have use our energy as an asset to bring employers that hire a lot of people and help our city, and don't compete with providing adequate housing in our community? So I think this is really not supported by our comprehensive plan. I see the connection that staff, James, you've tried to make here to for Goal 1, Chapter 5, about driving infill development, but it misses, I think, two very key points under economic development and facilities and infrastructure that directly relate to the energy and our energy future. So I'm concerned about the project itself and how this actually fits in, and it does not fit in with our comprehensive plan. Are there other comments on the application before us tonight?
Mr. Chair, I'll just
Yes,
add one thing.
Mr. Gorham, please.
16 jobs always sounds impressive, but Brainerd's problem isn't having great jobs. Brainerd's problem is having people with great jobs who live in Brainerd. And that's the issue. We have great jobs. We have the best jobs, but that doesn't necessarily help our tax base. That's all.
Thank you. Well, with that, I'm looking
Chair?
for,
Mr. Chair, this is Chuck.
Mr. Marone, thank you. I apologize for not checking in.
It's okay. No, I said I would interrupt
Gotta
if
be
I had
quick.
something, so appreciate it. I guess my concern is the issue that I raised with the security on the site. I think, you brought up the idea of a reclamation bond or something like that. And I feel if we're going to pass this, that we would want something equivalent to that. I recognize the optimism of the applicant, and I'm not in any position to argue with their business model or their business plan. But I don't know of any business plan that begins without optimism. And I think our job is not to be overly optimistic, but to look at the best interests of the community. This certainly is a business enterprise that has a lot of volatility to it, does not have a long track record to it. And I guess my concern would be that we would take one of our sites that we've developed and put money into and what have you, that we expect to have for our tax base and our unemployment base for a long time, and essentially burn it on something that would ultimately, not work out, walk away, and then leave us with a mess. And so if we're going to pass this, and I'm not inclined to vote for it, but if we are inclined to pass this, I would request that we ask for some type of reclamation bond. And I am happy to have that expire in 5 years. I mean, if we have a track record that goes beyond 5 years, then maybe we don't need it. But I would want it to at least run for the next 5 years, something that would give us the revenue that we needed to secure the site, redevelop the site if this use were to be abandoned. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marone.
Mr. Chair, may I make a comment?
Hang on, please, Mr. Tang.
Mr. Chair.
I was recognizing. You were
I
pointing
pointed
that
him, make
way.
sure you didn't miss him, yes, sir.
Very good. Okay, thank you, Mr. Erickson, please.
So I guess, I see this a little bit differently, a little bit different interpretation of the comprehensive plan. I think, I don't think it's the city's, yes, I kind of like the idea of the reclamation bond with an expiration date, as Commissioner Marone has suggested. I see this in a lot of different situations. I guess I'm not entirely sure it's the city's role to be, necessarily questioning the business plans of, those who are proposing to do either business in the city or as nonprofits. That risk is something that those investors are taking on themselves. And we do need to weigh, what impacts it has on the city, on the residents. And, just to comment on, talk on the tax base too, I guess, by not allowing something like this to happen also has an impact on the tax base as well. And so, and I think, the applicant has demonstrated a little bit of an ability to, talked about how the reclamation would be mitigated by some of these factors, like the electronics being stored in the containers, which would be removable fairly easily. The concrete slabs, I guess there'd need to be more information on how that could be, if that infill would work. I don't have the expertise to know how that works, but I guess the energy concern is not as strong of a concern for me. How long have we sat with empty lots in this industrial park, and now we have an opportunity to at least put it to some use? And so I guess I'm interested, I like the recommendation of the reclamation bond that would help the city kind of mitigate some of its losses if this was not successful. And I like the expiration of maybe 5 years, because at that point, then it's got a proven track record. So those are kind of my thoughts at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Erickson. Yes, Mr. Yeager.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to just ask a quick question. Perhaps James can answer. If you can't, I totally get it. But I wasn't a part of all of the conversations that happened on the BPU side, on the whole front side of this, where the discussions came about of the surplus energy that BPU has that effectively we don't use, correct? And so I just want to make sure, James, it's my understanding, just following this kind of from the sideline, that BPU has vetted this energy request, has looked at it, what's in front of us, and feels like we have the energy to sell.
They do. They do not have any concerns on it.
Okay, thank you, James. So I'm just to kind of let everybody know where I'm at. I look at energy like a commodity, and it's something that a city has that can. If it's something that a city has, which is why these companies are looking to us, if it's an asset that we uniquely have, and there's a business that wants to come in, no matter how large, how small, and make use of that and provide service and live the American dream in our city with an asset that we have, I fully support it. So I'm going to fall on the side of BPU has vetted the energy use. We have an applicant in front of us who wants to do something with a bare lot that is sitting there doing nothing. We don't have anything else in front of us right now. So I just believe that if you have somebody who wants to go, you let them go. And so I'm going to be siding in that direction. As for the mitigation of or the riparian effort that would be on a site like this, hypothetically, if these pods were removed, you got some concrete there, you scrape that out, that goes right down the road to Crowing Recycling. They chop up the concrete and reuse it. I don't see that as a big deal, but so I would be leaning to not adding that as a condition. I can think of dozens of other commercial projects where if they were to fail, and that's a big if they were to fail, we'd be left with asphalt, concrete, sewer, whatever. Who knows? That may help the next person come in. So I'm in support of this. That's where I'm going to land on this. And I do appreciate the applicant bringing it forward. It's fascinating stuff. Never thought I'd sit on this commission and have something like this in front. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yeager. Other comments? Discussion? Hearing none, I'd be looking for a motion, current motion proposed here is approval of the interim use permit with conditions.
Mr. Chair, can I slip in one more
You
question?
may.
Can anybody answer the question is what percentage of the energy that BPU has is renewable? What's the percentage? And what's not coming from the dam, where does that come from?
Can I speak, Mr. Chair?
Mr. Tang, go ahead, please.
Thank you. And Ms. Gorham, I can kind of answer your question on this percentage of energy. The way the relationship we have with BPU is they are providing the distribution infrastructure for us. That's the substation and also the electric wire to our site. And for that, we actually already paid BPU about $350,000 for that infrastructure. In addition, we are buying the power directly from AEP through the MISO electricity trading market. So we're not really taking the electricity generated in Brainerd. We are getting power from the Minnesota ISO market through AEP. AEP is a very large energy trading company. And for providing the distribution infrastructure, we are paying BPU, I believe, well above $1 million a year. based on our energy consumption. In addition to that, to address Mr. Duval's the other concern, we have actually purchased through purchasing the renewable energy credits from the 5.75 megawatts of solar farm that BPU is constructing. We are financing that solar farm, which I believe, according to the last conversation I had with BPU personnel, will be finished end of this year and early next year. That power will be used for Brainerd. We are just buying power from the grid.
Thank you, Mr. Tang.
And also, just sorry.
Yep.
One more comment.
Yes.
We're not getting the land for free. We are paying I would say, a above market price for the land. So whatever investments you have made to develop the industrial park should already be recouped from the purchase price.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
I don't think it exactly answers my question, but that was an interesting answer.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Mr. Tang, that was an interesting answer. I still kind of would like to know, like, these light bulbs right here, I mean, is this 10% renewable? Is this 90% off the grid? That's what I'm trying to kind of get at, is what our situation is. Are we just basically, one moment, are we basically in a situation where we're just the conduit for the larger grid? Is that what we are?
For
They can
this
answer that question?
Yeah, for this particular arrangement, yes. And James, maybe you can confirm that?
Yeah, so like Mr. Tang had mentioned, I wasn't in a lot of the BPU meetings for this part of it, but I believe they're purchasing from a larger grid, and because they're using BPU substations and lines, there's a certain percentage that also has to be paid to BPU for that.
And a question for then you, Mr. Chair, does that help answer the questions about the energy of Brainerd and our energy security at all? I don't know. I'm still kind of wondering.
Yeah,
Does that help?
It doesn't help. It doesn't help me.
Okay.
Where that.
I'm still confused too.
Yeah. Well, there's a fair amount of confusion, but also, you're reliant on the broader grid and the way energy moves around on the grid. I mean, we need the electrical engineers in here and the BPU folks to be able to help map that out on the nuances of that. With that, I'm still at the point of maybe looking for a motion, and there's been some conditions provided by staff and mentioned by members of the commission. So,
Mr. Chair, then I'm prepared to make a motion to recommend approval of the interim use permit for outdoor storage as a principal use for a crypto mining facility, with the following condition: that the interim use permit is contingent upon the final sale of the industrial park property to VCV, and is voided upon operations discontinuing as a crypto mining facility.
Second, Yeager.
motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, we will go to roll call vote. Mr. Krambik, could you please do roll call?
Yes. Gorham. Calroos.
Well,
Yeager.
I haven't voted.
Oh, sorry.
So want to try it again?
Yep. Gorham.
I'm going to vote nay at this point. I just don't think I know enough.
Calroos. Yeager.
Yes.
Erickson.
Yes.
Marone.
No.
Woodward.
Yes.
Duval.
No.
Tie.
And we don't have a tiebreaker.
Paper, rock, scissors?
It falls to the chair, doesn't it?
Procedurally here,
They have the bylaws?
yeah.
Point of order, I believe it falls to the chair.
I'm. James, do you have some guidance on procedural issue here?
Believe a new motion could potentially be made. I think it does have to essentially have a majority.
To me, I think it might be a failed motion by virtue of that tie that it does not pass, but. This is why you have an odd number of members.
And odd members.
Yeah. I don't have good guidance here to work from. Who's running?
Doesn't really go to the winner.
Well, at this point, absent sufficient guidance here, I'm going to say that the motion does not pass. And so we could modify the motion. Or we can end our debate. There's no recommendation at this moment to approve the interim use permit. Is there an alternate motion on? Hearing none, I'm going to say that the interim use permit for 1918 TC Drive is not approved. And we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Next up is.
So,
Mr.
sorry,
Erickson.
yeah, I just wanted to ask a question, the bylaws again, we, just gonna,
Our bylaws unfortunately are ambiguous on a tie. It's process-wise. Let's see if I can.
I mean, I guess in lieu of a clear answer, instead of having it fail, would we want to push it through and have council make that decision?
I anticipate that's what's going to happen.
I would presume that,
Because this can be appealed, correct, to the council? Am I correct in understanding that? Because the city council serves as our board of appeals. So I'm thinking whether we yea or nay it goes to the city council and they vote on it.
or by default, our recommendation is not to recommend it.
Sure, no, I understand. So
that fair?
it's gonna go to council with a, well, it's a matter of if it goes to council with a default to a recommendation or not. We're defaulting to a null recommendation versus a affirmative.
By virtue of it being a tie, I think a null is exactly the way to think about it, as opposed to we haven't really voted it up and we haven't voted it down. We're in the middle.
All right,
That,
yep, thank you. I just
fair?
wanted
I
to
mean-
double check, and I think, yeah, it's
No,
kind of an unfortunate situation, but yeah, either way, it's
yeah,
gonna go.
I don't know where else, but our guidance is thin on this right at the moment, so.
Understood, thank you.
So with that, I would like to move to item 6B on the agenda, the interim use permit request for outdoor storage at 1911 TC Drive. And James, could you please set that one up for us?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so Jerry Tang has submitted a request on behalf of VCV Digital Infrastructure Minnesota for an interim use permit for outdoor storage as a principal use to operate a crypto mining facility at 1911 Thesey Drive. So this property is located just to the north of 1918. The applicant proposes operation of the crypto mining facility at this location with 24 containers to house the data mining machines along with 24 cooling towers. This site would also have a guard shack and construction trailer, would not have a main office building. So the applicant, much like the other one, is proposing an 8-foot tall chain link fence with privacy slats around it. The difference in this one is that the privacy slats would be required on the south and west side because of view to the right-of-way area. So because the rest of this property is so similar to the other property, other than kind of that caveat to it with a view to the right-of-way facility. Staff did recommend approval of the interim use permit for outdoor storage as a principal use for a crypto mining facility with the following conditions. Interim use is contingent upon final sale of the industrial park property to VCV and is voided upon operations discontinued as a crypto mining facility. Because these are two different properties, there would be two separate interim use permits on this. And I'll open it up to Planning Commission.
Thank you, James. Are there questions for staff? Hearing none, we'll go to public. Yes, please, Ms. Woodward.
Were the energy consumption estimates for both properties or just for the first interim use permit by itself?
They're for both properties.
For both, okay.
Other questions of staff? Hearing none, we'll move to public hearing at 6:51. And at this point, Mr. Tang, ask you if your additional or comments or points that you would like to make specific to this particular interim use permit application that you'll want to guide our attention to.
Yeah, I guess I would just like to reiterate that we have paid at this point to BPU over $300,000 in financing the solar farm that's being built in Brainerd. And we paid for the infrastructure that has drawn electricity to the industrial park. And we have fulfilled pretty much every thing that we said we're going to do vis-a-vis City of Brainerd and BPU. I just, I guess, understand the board members, they have different opinions on the energy usage, as I emphasized. Probably warrants somebody from BPU to speak in a future meeting, that we are not really taking energy away from Brainerd. We're buying from the national grid.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tang. Any questions of the applicant from the commission? Hearing none. At this point, is there anyone in the audience, either in person or online, that would wish to speak about or to the interim use permit application at 1911 TC Drive? Is there anyone that would care to speak to the application for an interim use permit at 1911 TC Drive? Hearing none, we're going to close the public hearing at 6:54 and bring it back to discussion at the commission. Does anyone have any discussion, questions, comments on this? I think this looks pretty much the same as the one we just had. The issues remain probably the same. Mr. Erickson?
No comments for me other than what's already been said for the last one.
Yeah.
So as a point of order, can we make the motion? Or do we make the motion, call the vote, and then
I
do
think
next steps for
we
the
need to do
applicant?
that. Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Thank you for,
Then I would like to make a motion to approve the interim use permit contingent upon final sale of the industrial park property to VCV, and the interim use permit will be voided upon operations discontinuing as a crypto mining facility.
Second. Erickson.
We have a motion by Woodward, second by Erickson. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, Director Krambik, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, thank you. Gorham.
No.
Calroos. Yeager.
Yes.
Erickson.
Yes.
Marone.
No.
Woodward.
Yes.
Duval.
No. So that is a tie vote, so that motion does not pass. For these two items, Director Krambik, can you advise the applicant of next steps here? Or we can maybe move on to the third. Why don't we move on to the third item, and then we'll do that. So our third item here is item 6C. We have a variance for setback standards at 1911 TC Drive. James, could you set that up for us, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a variance from setback requirements at 1911 EC Drive. Jerry Tang has submitted a request on behalf of VCV Digital Infrastructure for a variance at 1911 EC Drive. The requested variance is from section 515-2-16, .c, which is the General Industrial Zoning District Dimensional Standards. The applicant is proposing a reduced front yard setback from 40 feet to 36 feet for the installation of a guard shack for the crypto mining facility. The General Industrial Zoning District Standards list a minimum front yard setback in the zone to be 40 feet from the front property line. Accessory building standards must meet all principal building setbacks. So a couple of conditions with variances. Variances may be granted when the applicant for the variance establishes that there are practical difficulties in complying with the zoning ordinance. So outdoor storage as principal use requires screening to the adjacent road right-of-way, and the developer is proposing the 8-foot high fence with the slats in it to screen the crypto mining facility. So with that, a guard shack would either need visibility to it or needs to be placed in front of it. So they are proposing that the guard shack would need to be placed in front of the gate and fence to provide security to the site. Another condition, if the variance is granted, will not alter the essential character of the locality. The property is surrounded by the General Industrial District with a second proposed crypto mining facility to the south. The guard shack placement would not alter the character of the locality. So with that, staff recommends approval of this variance request. The staff believes the requested variance meets the requirements outlined in section 515-5-4B of the Code of Ordinances. Potential condition of this is the variance is conditional upon approval of the interim use permit.
Thank you, James. Questions of staff?
Just the last thing, Mr. Chair.
Yes,
The
Mr. Marone.
last item you mentioned there, James, repeat that again? You said this would be contingent upon the interim use. So in other words, the first thing we did was deny the interim use, so then I'm kind of confused.
So if...
Mr. Krambik, please.
Yeah, so if city, so the next thing, it would be city council. So if the interim use would be denied, any type of variance request would be contingent upon approval of an interim use.
Okay.
Mr. Krambik, do you think that, that if the applicant wanted to do storage sheds for stuff as opposed to computers on this site and wanted to make a compound fenced and a guard shack on the front, would the variance, would the variance still be appropriate in that instance to request the variance to have something in front of the fence? I'm wondering whether these have to be separated, or excuse me, whether they have to be joined. I feel like the variance would actually be separate if from the interim use. It feels to me. Can you help me think about that? If you were to say it's not crypto mining, it's storage sheds, putting boats and people's stuff in there, and all the other factors are the same, that they want to push up the fence up closer to the setback line, and the guard shack would then cross over. Would we entertain a variance on that with a different kind?
I would say so. It could be separated.
So it would be my sense that we should approach it separate, regardless of the interim use permit, if the applicant wishes to construct. That's my feeling on it. I don't know if I'm going astray on this on you, James, or not.
Yep. Yeah, so if it should be done separately, I think you're probably correct with that, because they could propose, essentially an alternate design. Yep.
So with that, Mr. Erickson, please.
Yeah, just a couple questions for James. So the 40-foot setback, and they're looking for just simply to move it back 4 feet to have a 36-foot setback.
That's correct.
Instead. And then looking at the diagram, looks like the several parking stalls as well would be on, if this were to be granted, that would be within that area as well, right next to the guard shack.
Yep, that's correct. So the parking would meet the setback requirements. It's the guard shack that would not meet the setback requirements.
Okay.
Was that all, Mr. Erickson?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Sorry.
And I'll look for Mr. Marone to chime in if you're interested or have a point to make here. So at this point here, we're looking at this as a variance application for a setback, not directly linked to the interim use permit. So with that, an open public hearing at 7:01, and at this point, invite the applicant, Mr. Tang, to speak to the application for variance you have before us. We've stepped through sort of the basic points here. Are there any things that you would like to highlight or points that you would like to make regarding the application?
I do not. I think James gave a pretty comprehensive overview.
Very good, thank you. Members of the commission, any questions of the applicant at this point in time? Mr. Yeager, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a quick question. I'm just looking at the diagram here and just, I'm looking at the floor, at the bird's eye plan of the space, and I'm wondering why that building can't just be shifted back, even if it means that the fence is effectively touching the building. I mean, we see guard shacks all the time where they're either incorporated into the fence or even the fence is in front or the guard shack. But I'm just wondering, what is it that prevented you from moving that back to a conforming 40-foot? And you may not know, but if you do, that'd be fantastic.
Mr. Tang, please.
Yes, I can answer that. We have certain, I guess, requirements of the width of the internal road. If we move that guard shack back, it's gonna narrow the road. And because this is all sort of stemming from this 40-foot requirements.
Mr. Chair, a follow-up question to that response.
I just want to make sure that I understand. It appears to me that just looking off this by scale here, that you had that there's a space behind the building before the fence of about 10 feet, and then there's about 2 feet, and then the road begins. And I guess I'm just wondering why that shack couldn't be shoved right back to the fence, which then I mean, if the road is not impeded by the fence, the road shouldn't be impeded by the building if it's shoved back to the fence. So I'm just missing something here, planning-wise.
I guess we can move back to the fence. I don't know if that's going to meet the 40 feet requirement, because the fence was put up there to be 40 feet from the road, the main road.
It appears to me that the fence is beyond 40 feet, just looking at this in scale. It appears to me that it's about 20 feet behind the 40-foot setback. But I don't mean to put you on the spot here. I'm just looking at this diagrammically, so. That's all, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Please.
So, Mr. Tang had mentioned the requirement for the the private road there, is that just there's no way that you could alter that to accommodate that shack, or where's that requirement coming from?
And that would be directed to Mr. Tang? Correct. Mr. Tang, the question regarding the width of the road, where that's standard, or is that a required element or a adjustable width?
Yeah, sure. So the reason we need 20-foot, we actually narrowed it from 25, is these units, they would need to be trucked in here. So we want to make sure we can allow trucks to come in and make turns. If there's any maintenance or replacement of these containers, or even the transformers on site.
Okay, thank you very much. And I would add to that too, probably fire and emergency response as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Other questions of the applicant? James, do we know what the standards would be for fire and emergency vehicles? We dealt with that, I think, with one of the variances up off of Wise Road here recently on the road design. Do you recall?
I do not recall that number.
I mean, I think we're all zooming into the same place here, that, you know, narrowing down to 18 feet on the east-west side, allowing room on your turns, still for your trucks to navigate, but seems like that would give you the 4 feet to fall behind the, fall back in compliance with the setbacks on this. So that's I think the nature of why we're drilling down on that, Mr. Tang, is just say, is there flexibility? We're just shopping for 4 feet. And can an 18-foot wide east-west road suit the needs for your operations, understanding that you're needing to bring semi-trailers in with large objects that probably need to be boomed off of there and such?
That's a question I have to talk to my engineer. They are pretty professional. They have designed another site for us. So generally, whatever they design, there's a reason. And I already asked them to narrow down from 25 to 20.
Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, Mr. Tang. Mr. Erickson?
I guess just another alternate, which again would require a question of their engineers, but, you know, I guess I'm seeing the space to the left of the entrance and gate between the fence and the temporary construction trailer too. It looks like that there would be enough space there that would not require the variance. So I guess I'm wondering if there's an alternate possibility of moving the guard shack to the left of the entrance between the fence and the temporary construction trailer.
So currently to the west side of your entrance, Mr. Tang, the Commissioner Erickson is noting you currently have, looks like some shrubberies planted in front for screening as required by the ordinance, but whether the guard shack could be moved there, that would probably require a little realignment to the fence, right? Maybe backing the fence off a little bit there to, you know, if there's a need to get the guard shack fully within the 4 foot. We don't know what the measure of that is right now.
And I do have one thing to add to that.
Yes,
It
James,
would still
please.
have to meet the side yard
Side yard
setback then of 10 feet.
Okay.
10, so we've got, yeah, so the driveway almost looks like it probably takes most of that up, doesn't it?
Right, I guess there won't be 10 feet from the side if we move to the left.
Right, so we're crunching a different setback. So that's not thank you for that observation, James. So, okay, other questions for the applicant? Hearing none, is there anyone in the audience that would care to speak to the variance application before us for 1911 TC Drive? And if you're online and you want to speak, use *3 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. Again, is there anyone that would care to speak to the variance application for 1911 TC Drive? Hearing none, we'll close public hearing at 7:10 and bring it back to the commission for discussion. Is there discussion? I have concerns that this doesn't pass the test for practical difficulties here. Number one, quite frankly, the applicant, the plight of the landowners due to circumstances unique to the property, not created by the landowner. And this is a design issue that can probably be addressed. And I don't have the, quite frankly, maybe even moving the entrance to the opposite side there as well. Is that drawing back, can we get that drawing back up with the setback lines? Thank you, Brent. Looking at the setback, if you can kind of go to pull it north a little bit, yeah. So your degrees of freedom get quite large if you come in on the right side versus the left side here, and that, so, I think we're coming up with examples of how we could redesign this in a way that does not require a variance to meet from the setback requirements. So that's, I'm worried that, I'm not worried, I'm convinced it doesn't meet the variance test. And so we're needing to ask the applicant to redesign the proposal in order to be able to get the guard shack in, and they're obvious unprofessional individuals can see some opportunities here, so I'm sure, confident that your design team can probably do the same.
Mr. Chair, I guess.
Mr. Erickson, please.
Question for James. So James, of course, in the staff recommendation, you mentioned that, you believe it does meet the requirements. Are you able to elaborate on that? And
Yeah, in my staff report, there was one area that I talked about, the concern that Commissioner Duval brought up, that it is a design thing to maximize space, essentially. So, that is one thing that I did take into account. I think in my staff report as well, based on the nature of, it's a pretty unique thing that we're looking at here, based on the nature of having to screen the site, fully screen the site, not allowing the guard shack to be behind something that's, opaque and that you could just easily put a guard shack behind a fence, and the fence requirement having to be at the front setback line. I did see that there were some potential practical difficulties on the site from that, but certainly I did think about some of the comments that Commissioner Duval talked about as well.
thank you.
Other comments? Hearing none, I guess I'd be looking for a motion on this particular application for a variance.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Yeager.
I'd like to make a motion to deny the variance request. I just, based upon the mindset here, that I just don't believe that practical difficulty has been shown or something unique to this site. So I believe the design staff will figure this out, but at this time, my motion is going to be to deny this variance request.
I will second that.
We have a motion by Yeager, second by Gorham. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, Director Krambik, can you please do roll call?
Yes, Gorham,
Yay.
Calrus, Yeager,
Yes.
Erickson,
Yes.
Marone,
Yes.
Woodward,
Yes.
Duval.
Yes, so that motion passes. James, could you inform the applicant of next steps here and for the conglomerate of applications and decisions that were made here this evening?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So these 3 applications will be heard at the next City Council meeting, which will be Monday, October 3rd at 7:30, which will be a final vote on all 3 applications.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Tang, for your working with us here this evening. We're moving on the agenda to item 6D, variance from setback standards for 804 Oak Street. Director Krambik, can you set us up for that, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a variance from setback requirements. Mark Needham has submitted a variance request on behalf of Brainerd Public Schools at 804 Oak Street, Brainerd, Minnesota. So the request variance is from section 515-2-17.c, the PSP zoning district dimensional standards. The applicant is requesting a reduced rear yard setback from 10 feet to 0 feet for the addition of an ADA enclosed wheelchair lift along Pine Street. Some of the criteria for variances that I wanted to discuss here. Staff believes this variance request is supported by Goal 1 of Chapter 2 of the Comprehensive Plan, which states preserve and repurpose historic assets. Policy 6 under Goal 1 states strike a balance between preserving historic structures and building new within all land uses. Certainly, they are looking and have been looking to repurpose this site. So staff believes it is supported by the comprehensive plan. Also, variances may be granted when the applicant for the variance established that there are practical difficulties in complying with the zoning ordinance. The rear side of the building does not currently have an ADA accessibility to the first floor. I know that the door on the left-hand side, you either have to go up or down the steps. So this would grant accessibility to the first floor. The proposed structure will not extend further than the existing concrete steps in the rear of the building. There are really no other options on the rear side of the building for placement of the proposed structure that would reduce the requested setback. So also, if the variance is granted, will not alter the essential character of the locality. So this property has been used for educational purposes since it was built. Public and private schools and community centers are permitted within the PSP district. And the extension for the proposed ADA accessible lift will not extend further than the existing steps that I had previously talked about before. So with that, staff does recommend approval of the variance request, as staff believes the requested variance meets the requirements outlined in section 515-4-5-B. The Code of Ordinances is supported by the comprehensive plan and will allow for ADA accessibility on the rear side of the building, and investments made will only improve this property. With that, I'll open it up to Planning Commission for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Krambik. Questions of staff? All right, well, hearing none, we're going to go to public hearing, open the public hearing at 7:18, and ask representatives of the applicant to come forward and take questions from, maybe, again, if you can state your name and your affiliation.
Good evening, Reed T.C., Director of Buildings and Grounds, Brainerd Public Schools.
And are there aspects of this request that you would like to highlight and bring to our attention, or reinforce some of the points that were made?
Sure. For the past 3+ years, we've been going through a bond referendum here with our partners from ICS. Throughout the process, we've been updating 13 of our facilities. Our administration building at the Washington Educational Services Building is the last project on our docket to complete the referendum. Some of the points to this facility, we have over $30 million worth of need here. We're addressing a small function of that. We're still maintaining our early childhood operations at this facility, and that does host some of our kids with special needs. So we have one accessible entrance to this facility at this time, and that's on the northeast side of the building. You can see the sidewalk that loops to the northeast, right above the city there. Yep, you can test the other one to the north that loops up to the street where we currently drop kids off. Because of the nature of Oak Street and the speeds of vehicles going through there, we would like to move our early childhood entrance to the southwest corner of the facility. Most of our classes would be along that southwest side, so we would be receiving kids via special education buses that bring them there and would drop them off at that site and take proposed entrance in front of you tonight.
Very good, thank you, Mr. TC. Are there questions of the applicant, please, if you'll hang in there with us? Questions of the applicant? Okay, well, none right now. You can stay ready to jump back up if we need you. Thank you so much. Is there anyone here that would care to speak to the application for variance at 804 Oak Street? And if you are online, you'll be using *3 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. Is there anyone here that cares to speak to the variance at 804 Oak Street? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing at 7:20 and bring it back to the commission for discussion. Discussion, please. Yes, Mr. Gorham.
I would just say that this is a creative way to use an old building and to maintain it in the community, and I'm all in favor of it.
Thank you. Other discussion? Hearing none, I'd look for a motion on this particular application.
Move to approve, Erickson.
We have a motion by Erickson and second by Gorham. That'd be that. So is there any discussion on the motion?
Mr. Chair, just
Mr. Erickson, please.
felt it was a thoughtful design, so just to reiterate what Commissioner Gorham said.
Beg your pardon?
I just felt it was a thoughtful design, and I wanted to reiterate what Commissioner Gorham said.
Thank you. Other comments on, or discussion on the motion? Hearing none, Director Krambik, can you call roll, please?
Yes. Gorham.
Yes.
Calrus. Yeager.
Yes.
Erickson.
Yes.
Marone.
Yes.
Woodward.
Yes.
Duval.
Yes, that motion passes. Next steps for the applicant, please, James.
Yeah, so the application will have a final vote at the next city council meeting on October 3rd at 7:30 in the council chambers.
All right, thank you. So we're on to 6E, variance for boundary line adjustment, 3231 Oak Street. James, could you set that up for us, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Jordan Schnard has submitted a variance request on behalf of Liberty Group of Brainerd at 3231 Oak Street. The requested variance is from subdivision ordinance 500-7-4.f, lot frontage. The applicant is requesting a boundary line adjustment that will remove the required lot frontage on a public street. The applicant is proposing access to the property through a 33-foot wide easement. So the current lot, 3231 Oak Street, is currently a non-conforming lot as it is a flag lot and does not have the required width at the front yard setback for general commercial properties, but it does still have access to Oak Street. So that is the reason for the variance request, is this essentially would remove that frontage on Oak Street. So with that, I'll add a few points to the granting of a variance within the subdivision ordinance. The city may grant a variance from the minimum standards of this ordinance when in its opinion, undue hardship may result from strict compliance. So Liberty Group is proposing the sale of 3231 Oak Street. The new property owners will continue to use the lot for boat storage and boat service. Both 3231 Oak Street and 3323 Oak Street use the combined driveway to access their respective properties. The sale of the lot would cut off access to 3231, so still some type of easement would have to be created with this. There'd also be potential issues with 3323 Oak Street, the larger building there with the trucking turnaround in that area. So that's potentially a practical difficulty of the site. Also, a variance shall only be granted when the city finds that there are special circumstances or conditions affecting the property, that such strict application of the provisions of this ordinance would deprive the applicant of the reasonable use of this land. So with that, the land next to it, all of these properties are owned by Liberty Group. 3323 Oak Street uses the west side of their property for receiving shipments and would like to potentially expand operations on that side of the building. The current configuration would make it potentially difficult to receive trucking shipments to that property. So with that, staff does recommend approval of the variance request for the boundary line adjustment. As staff believes the requested variance meets the requirements outlined in section 500-2-4 of the subdivision ordinance. With that, I'm not sure if the applicant is here, but I can certainly answer any questions that Planning Commission has.
Okay, it appears the applicant is here, so questions of staff? Hearing none, we'll move to public hearing at 7:25 and ask the applicant, the representative, please state your name and address, and welcome to the commission.
Yeah, Aaron Crandall, I'm the Chief Legal Officer at CJK Group. I'm working with Liberty Group on the sale of this property to the existing dealership that's the current tenant of the property. This would really change any of the current use of the property. The existing driveway will then become the easement to the property. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions of the applicant? Mr. Yeager.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry. What is the impetus for this? What is the reasoning for this?
Well, we're selling the green dealership property behind there.
Okay.
Right now, it's currently accessed through that flag lot.
Okay.
access point. We're gonna reconfigure the boundary lines so that parcel ends up being landlocked. So we would then be giving them, you either have the flag, access point, which is not conforming, I believe, or we would redraw the boundary lines and provide this access.
Understood. Makes sense. Okay.
Brent, could you put the survey document on screen, if you would, please, and framing in. Mr. Crandall, so you've resurveyed, it looks like you've squared up track B a little bit, taken some of the jogs out of that.
Yep.
And then, so then all of that property to the east of that new survey line would become incorporated into track C. Am I reading your
That's correct.
drawing
Yep.
properly?
Yep.
And the purpose of that, as I understand from the applicant, is to allow for future expansion of the building on track C. Am I still doing good?
Correct. Yep.
So if we're, do you think that future expansion of the building on track C would actually overlie the existing easement?
Yeah, we've
That
addressed
you're
that.
reserving that?
Yeah, we've addressed that in the easement itself. The easement is saying if there is future expansion on track C, which would impact the ability for track A to use that easement property, that we've designated an alternative 33-foot easement across track B to continue to get to track A.
And that is what I'm looking for. And I don't see that alternative on here, so it appears to be, set for a renegotiation someplace down the line if you don't have that alternative in there. So if you already have that,
Part of our purchase agreement.
perfect. So we've got, is that someplace, can you maybe point, we don't have a good screen here, to point where that,
Right here, maybe.
where that alternative easement would be?
Yeah.
You're on track B, you were saying.
We've got the mouse right on it there. It would go right there on that part of that existing structure right there. It would be a straight access right from Oak Street up to, track B.
Got it. So in there, it will cross track B and not be incorporated into, your alternative is not within track C.
Correct.
Got it. And there's like a trigger in your purchase agreement. It says, at such time that we want to put a structure over the easement that we have primarily granted you, the secondary becomes your
Yeah,
access.
both the purchase agreement and the recorded easement would say that if Liberty Group
So that's not part of the super fine print on the 8.511, is it? Because I had a hard time reading that to start with, but okay. So we have a secondary easement site already negotiated out, so that's perfect. So, other questions of the applicant? All right, well, hearing none, thank you very much, and stay handy if we have some additional questions, Mr. Crandall. Is there anyone here that would care to speak to the variance for boundary line adjustment at 3231 Oak Street? If you're online, star 3 to raise your hand to be recognized, star 6 to unmute. And again, is there anyone else that would care to speak to the variance for a boundary line adjustment at 3231 Oak Street? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing at 7:30 and bring the discussion back to the commission. Discussion. It seems like it would be helpful. It would be helpful to me to know or have a statement affirming the fact that there is a secondary easement identified in here, so that we're not setting up a conflict here by the approval of a variance to then put hardship on the owner of Tract A if Tract C exercises their right to build on. And so that, to me, is a pretty helpful piece that we would want to have in here someplace. And it may also impact how Tract B is further developed as well for structures and things like that. So I might think about a condition on that an alternative access site is identified. Other thoughts?
I guess, Mr. Chair,
Erickson, please.
I guess, would you want to do that contingent upon the purchase agreement that includes that alternative?
That would be one very good way to tie it all together in a bundle.
I'll wait for other discussion, but I'm ready for the motion then.
Mr. Yeager.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'm just thinking about this a little bit here. The future development of Track C is purely hypothetical. Unless I'm misunderstanding this, they're already presenting an easement to allow access to Tract A with this. If the applicant wants to landlock their own land, I say we let them landlock their own land. They're providing easement here, and I think that future development's purely hypothetical. So, I mean, and I guess where I'm at on this is I want to focus on just what's been submitted, and for that reason, I think I will be in support of this variance application.
Thank you, Mr. Yeager. Other discussion? All right, well, hearing none, I'd be looking for a motion.
Mr. Chair? Oh, Mr. Chair?
Yeager.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the variance application as requested.
A motion and a second. Any discussion on that motion? So you're excluding the identification of a secondary easement by your motion, is
The only
that
reason
correct?
I am, because I believe that we've gotten into the realm of conjecture on potential possible use that's really not a part of this application. So if the applicant is willing to throw that, is willing to provide that to us, fantastic. But I'm just feeling like we should look at the documents that have been submitted. I believe we've got what we need here to make a decision on this particular variance application, so that's where my mind is.
In our findings of fact prepared by staff, item 3D, potentially expand operations on that side of the building is a factor here, which says that, if we may be setting up to have a future conflict here, and the opportunity to be able to address it at the same time, in my mind, that we pass the variance or vote on the variance is to identify that second secondary site so that we're not putting hardship here and one party holding out the development, using the easement as a lever to hold back planned expansion that's identified in the application on the start here. So that's my point of saying the secondary allows Tract A to be able to have unimpeded access to Oak Street, though through a different alignment so that the other Tract C building could exercise the potential for expanding operations on that side of the building as staff has identified. So that's the purpose for identifying that and suggesting that that could be a condition if you're amenable to that.
I'm open to that, yeah.
Friendly amendment?
And is,
Yeah.
is the, Ms.
Sure,
Ms. Woburn, are you open to that as well?
we can amend it.
And, you know, we don't have to see that drawing, but that sounds like that's already part of, it exists in the paperwork that's going across desks so that secondary is identified and it's part of, and that would validate the variance. So, procedure-wise, do we vote on the amendment to the easement, or amendment to the motion first here?
No, I'll just attach it to my motion, just, we can vote on it as one motion.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right, at this point, is there any further discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Krambik, can you call roll, please?
Gorham,
Yes.
Calrus, Yeager,
Yes.
Erickson,
Yes.
Marone, Woodward,
Yes,
Duval.
Yes, and that motion passes. Can you inform the application next steps, please, James?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this, the final vote will be held at the next city council meeting on October 3rd in the council chambers at 7:30.
Thank you, Mr. Crandall. We are now at item 6F, a variance from setback standards for 515 South 9th Street. James, can you set that up for us, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Eric Stangler has submitted a request on behalf of Stangler Properties, LLC, for a variance at 515 South 9th Street, Brainerd. The requested variance is from Section 515-2-9.c, TN-2 zoning district dimensional standards. The applicant is requesting a reduced side yard setback from 5 feet to 2.5 feet along the north boundary line for the development of a duplex on the property. So I do want to point out, this wasn't in the staff report, but this variance request was approved 2 years ago by the city of Brainerd. The applicant did not start construction on the project. Variances essentially have 1 year to start. They can petition for an extension beyond that, but it has been 2 years, so it has expired because construction did not occur on the site. At that time, the requested variances was for 3 feet. It was approved for 3 feet. The applicant is here. I believe he remeasured the site and is now requesting 2.5 feet to be able to fit the proposed duplex on the site. So with that, I'll talk about some of the points about conditions for granting the variance. So staff does believe this variance request is supported by Goal 1 of Chapter 3 of the Comprehensive Plan, which states, provide a diverse mix of housing choices for all stages of life, income ranges, and ownership/rental preferences. Policy 5 under Goal 1 states, ensure an adequate supply of quality and affordable housing units for current and future residents. And also, variances may be granted when the applicant for the variance established that there are practical difficulties in complying with the zoning ordinance. The proposed property is less than the required width for the TN2 district, Traditional Neighborhood 2, which requires a 45-foot wide property when creating new lots. So this is a non-conforming lot at 37.6 feet wide. So to be able to fit that on there does pose a practical difficulty that the property owner did not create. Also, the variance, if granted, will not alter the essential character of the locality. The TN2 district supports a high-density housing and multifamily housing. This lot will meet also impervious surface and off-street parking requirements on the site as depicted in the site plan. I did want to clarify in the site plan, there are two of them that are in the packet. The first one was submitted with the variance, but did not show what the requested setbacks were. So I did have the applicant resubmit the second one that's on the screen here. So you see the garage is proposed to be 25 feet off of the alley. Our new zoning ordinance does require rear-loaded garages when there is an alley in the TN2 district. It also requires 2 parking spots per unit. So essentially, there'd be a space in each side of the garage as well as in front of the garage would also have a parking spot. So it would meet the essentially two parking space requirement for the TN2 district. You'll also see the TN2 district does allow a setback standard closer to the street than what we previously had for our zoning district. So the applicant is proposing the house to align with the other houses on the block, approximately 10 feet from the front property line. And then you'll see on the north side there, that is where the variance request is for. It'd be 2.5 feet from that property line I believe, maybe one of the drawings, I can't remember. The doors, I believe, are going to be on the south side there, and I believe that's why they're looking at having more space there is for sidewalk entrance to the respective housing units. So with that, staff does recommend approval of this variance request as staff believes the requested variance meets the requirements in section 515-5-4.b of the Code of Ordinances and is supported by the comprehensive plan. With that, I will open it up to the Planning Commission for any other questions.
Thank you, James. Brent, do we still have Mr. Marone online, or do we drop him?
Mr. Marone is not online anymore.
He's not online. Okay, thank you. Note that. So, questions of staff, please.
I have a quick question, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Gorham, please.
So the doors to this house, if I was on the street, I wouldn't see the doors, correct? The doors are on the side of the house.
That's correct.
Is the rest of the houses in the neighborhood, is this common in the rest of the house, rest of the houses in the neighborhood?
It would not be.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I believe if we were to put on the aerial photo, I think the parcel to the north also side loads.
This is bringing back, we talked about this 2 years ago.
And you said the same thing. I knew you were going to say it again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
The parcel to the north, I think they're 41240989. I think also side loads
Okay,
like that.
all right, well.
Other questions of staff?
I have one quick question.
Yes, Mr. Yeager, please.
We got overhangs on both these buildings here also, so I'm just looking at the distance between the two, now working the math. This came up last time that the overhangs were going to be relatively close. They're going to be even closer now. I just want to make sure that that was a consideration.
And that is something that the applicant is here. You may be able to answer that.
All right.
Other questions of staff? All right, well, hearing none, we're going to move to public hearing at 7:43 and ask the applicant if you would please come to the podium and state your name and address and tell us a bit about your project, things that you would like us to consider that maybe haven't been discussed yet, or emphasizing points there. So.
Issue last time, and I didn't have a great answer, but I actually went out and measured where the building is going to sit, and a little bit of clarification
Could we have that aerial photograph again, please, Brent? Is that the one you're wanting to reference? Okay.
So the garage on the north lot, on the alley side, I measured where the edge of our garage is gonna sit, because we're gonna center it in the lot. It's 9 feet from that garage. So the building is gonna be towards the west, and I measured from where our building is gonna sit to the neighboring house, and that's 19 feet. So, it looks like it's very close, but in my opinion, it's quite.
Questions of the applicant, Mr. Erickson?
I'm sorry, so 19 feet from the northernmost side of the house you're proposing to build to the house to the north, or is it the one to the south?
The one to the north.
Okay,
I measured on the south as well. With the 5-foot existing variance, the difference there is 9 feet.
okay.
So my measurement from, I actually screwed those up, where the garage is to the existing garage on the north lot is 11 feet. And the distance between the house on the south lot to our existing building with the 5-foot variance is 9.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions of the applicant? All righty. Well, hearing none, thank you, and stay tight if we need to hit you for some more questions, but you can certainly take your seat and, yep. And is there anyone else that would care to speak to the application or variance on 515 South 9th Street? Yes, ma'am, if you'd please come to the podium and state your name and address.
We own the property to the north, and people do not go out the side, they go out the back.
Back, thank you.
So that's something to clarify. And we're worried about snow plowing, there isn't a whole lot of space between our house and the property line right now, and we can move it over, we're concerned about emergency vehicles getting in, we're concerned about, let's see here. I guess I didn't mention that, okay, in the shade, in the snow, in the sun, it's gonna make an impact on our property, as far as we're concerned. And we notice here that there's 2.5 feet on our side, but now there's 5 feet on this side, and I hear now they're gonna put doors over here, but that kinda makes it work for us.
Doors, I can't see your,
They're putting the doors on the south side.
that's our understanding from the application, yeah.
And I don't know if there's a possibility to put the doors on the other side and move it over that way a little bit. It would have it seem a little more fair to the neighborhood. And I don't know what the size of the building is. There isn't anything on the drawing that shows, it looks to me like it's a square. Pretty much.
Brent, could you put the drawing up there?
It's 30 by 60.
60, yeah,
Where's
the
thirty side?
architectural drawing, there you go, yeah. So it'd be 30 wide, north-south, and 60 wide, east-west. North-south. Yes. Going to east-west from 9th to the alley.
Can I ask a question? Ms. Bement?
Ms. Bemis?
Sorry, Mr. Chair. You said, so I apologize, you own the property to the north or to the south of the?
North.
All right, that's all, thank you.
Does anyone else want to speak to the variance here on 15 515 South 9th Street. And do we have anybody online at this point? Lonely you, huh? So last call, variance, anyone wanting to make comments on the variance for setback requirements, 515 South 9th Street? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing at 7:50 and bring it back to the commission for discussion. Any discussion?
I'll make an observation that I've noticed just from being in the neighborhood and from also what you can see from the aerial map too, just on the side loading comment too. And there are several properties that have that side loading, like with the doors on the side in that neighborhood. So to me, that is not I don't think it's out of the character of the neighborhood in that aspect.
Thank you, Mr. Erickson. Other comments or discussion? Again, similar observations, the character of the neighborhood. There you see a lot that are completely filled lots. I mean, you're looking at existing substandard lots of record, so you're trying to make a reasonable use of some of these smaller lots like that. A lot of the houses there are in that 30-foot width range, and side entry, again, is, you see that in some of those, and a lot of those houses, or a number of those houses, are biased towards the north lot line as well. So it sort of would be consistent and not in contrast to what's going on in the neighborhood. Maybe questions for James. So for emergency vehicle access, that's not a blind alley, that's a through alley, is that correct?
I believe that is a through alley.
That's a through alley, and then we've got the street on the front as well, so I feel like the access could be from the alley or from the South 9th Street if there's an emergency, and then to the question of, Mr. Stangler, to the question of flipping the layout to have the entry on the north side and biasing the house to the south, could you maybe comment on their thoughts on that, if you could come up to the podium and so in a sense, mirror imaging your floor plan to open to the north as opposed to the south. What are your thoughts on that, and what would be some of the considerations that you would have to make to make that?
I guess the biggest thing, we mirrored a property that we own up in northeast Brainerd, and in winter, we want our sidewalks and stuff on the south side of the building usually, just for snow removal, melting the north side of the building without sun exposure. A lot of times can be dangerous, ice buildup, and just creates additional issues, and that's why we designed it the way we did.
Thank you. I think that's all. Thank you very much. Any other discussion or questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Erickson, please.
So that's why I clarified where Ms. Piment's property was on the north side, because the sidewalks are proposed to be on the south side.
Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, I'd be looking for a motion.
Motion to approve the variances requested.
Second, Erickson.
Motion by Woodward, seconded by Erickson. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, Director Krambik, could you call the roll?
Yes. Gorham.
Yes.
Calrus. Yeager.
Yes.
Erickson.
Yes.
Marone. Woodward.
Yes.
Duval.
Yes, that motion carries. Can you inform the applicant of the next steps?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the final vote for the variance request will be at the October 3rd City Council meeting, City Council chambers at 7:30.
Righty, so we are at item 6G. We have a variance request from Garage Placement Standards and Height Standards, 324 Woodland Hills Lane. Director Krambik, can you set that up for us, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So Jeff Howard has submitted a request for 2 variances at 324 Woodland Hills Lane. The requested variances are from sections 515-2-5.c, the Garden Living Zoning District dimensional standards. So the applicant is requesting a detached garage placement in front of the principal structure, and for the proposed detached garage to exceed the height of the principal structure by 3 feet, 4.5 inches. The proposed detached garage size is 40 feet by 40 feet with a height of 15 feet, 7.5 inches at the midpoint of the roof. So the GL zoning district dimensional standards requires detached garage placement behind the principal building. The applicant is requesting that the garage placement would be 52 feet from the front property line, which when I measured out was approximately 50 feet in front of the primary structure. So also within the Garden Living Zoning District, the accessory structure height may not exceed the height of the principal structure. This is measured at the midpoint of the roof. So the applicant is requesting a 15-foot, 7.5-inch height at the roof midpoint for the detached garage. So this parcel is in the GL zoning district, which is primarily single-family homes. It does have an attached garage. The size of this lot is consistent with other Garden Living District parcels and is heavily wooded. I do want to note that currently you'll see pictured on the map here, there are 2 parcels here. The applicant has consolidated the lots with Crow Wing County, just not pictured on the map yet until essentially the next the next tax year. So then at that point they will be combined. That way the accessory structure is on the same lot as the principal structure. So with combined, this lot is allowed up to 2,279 square feet of accessory structure square footage. The proposed number of combined accessory structure plus the existing garage is 2,176, which would not exceed the maximum number. So with that, criteria for approving variances. Variances may be granted when the applicant for the variance has established that there are practical difficulties in complying with the zoning ordinance. So the applicant states that the requested variance for an increased height would allow for entry for a pickup and camper, so that's for the height purposes of it. The plight of the landowner is due to circumstances unique to the property, not created by the landowner. So this property is unique due to the rear topography. I believe on the previous map there it shows the topography change on there, which when you reach the primary structure, which is set further back on the property, you start to have a significant slope of 6 feet to 8 feet where the location of the primary structure is. A detached garage foundation would be difficult to construct on this slope. And as you go further back, where it maybe starts to level out a bit, there is wetland considerations in that area. So with that, there are many other homes in Brainerd that have, I lost my spot here. So with that, a variance request to increase the garage height, in staff opinion, would be created by the landowner as it is not unique to the site. There are many other homes in Brainerd that have a similar primary structure height, so I did take that into consideration. We're looking at 2 parts here. The topography on the rear side certainly is something that is unique to the property, but requesting a height for the increased garage is something that is maybe more of a problem for the entire city of Brainerd. that may not be unique to the site. The applicant is here, so he may be able to answer some questions with that as well. Also, the variance, if granted, will not alter the essential character of the locality. The garden living district does allow for detached accessory structures. The proposed accessory structure would meet the front yard setback standard of 50 feet, so that it would be meeting the principal structure setback standards, and it would be screened by woodland vegetation. So with that, staff does recommend approval of the variance request to take place. The request to place a proposed detached garage in front of the primary structure, 52 feet from the front property line, as staff believes the requested variance meets the requirements outlined in section 515-5-4B of the Code of Ordinances and is supported by the comprehensive plan. Staff also does have concerns about the variance request to increase garage height, as it is not unique to the property. The applicant is proposing to use the structure in a reasonable manner to allow for entry of a camper and truck. The increase in height would not have a major impact to the surrounding properties because of the vegetation that would be screening other properties in the neighborhood. So with that, I'll open it up to questions from the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Krambik. Are there questions of staff?
Well, no, I don't.
Director Krambik, so tell me again how the height of the principal structure is measured?
It is measured at the midpoint of the roof.
Does that take into effect any kind of architectural details that, like a cupola or something that might be on the house? Is that the point at which it's measured, or is it measured at the ridge line?
So yeah, essentially you take the eave to the point of the house. This one's a rambler, so it's fairly easy. If it were a structure that had multiple roof heights or characteristics to it, you'd have to kind of take an average between those two.
So it's not the highest point.
It's not the highest point.
It is a mathematical averaging of
the eave to the ridge line.
Other questions of staff? All right, hearing none, we're going to open public hearing at 8:03 and ask the applicant to please come forward and give us your name and address and tell us about your project, things that you would like us to better understand.
Camper on it, and a primary reason for this building would be to store that truck and camper in there, since the attached garage now does not have a garage door high enough to allow parking in there. It is not a tall camper, it is what commonly referred to as a pop-up camper where it goes down, and so frankly, I'm just looking for a garage opening of another foot to let me use the reason for the building, that is to protect the truck and the camper, which is a sizable investment, protect it, and that's the reason to be able to do that. You need a slightly larger garage door, height-wise, which necessitates higher walls and peak of the roof. And so, in some senses, this could be a very practical difficulty, because I can't store my protected anyway right now. And that was the reason for the request. As you can see, everything else works well. The setbacks, the footprint of the structure.
Thank you. Questions of the applicant? Thank you. Is there anyone online, Brent? Boy, oh boy. Lost our crowd, did we, huh? Well, with that, I'm going to close the public hearing at 8:05. and bring the discussion back to the commission. So, discussion, please. Hearing none, perhaps looking for a motion. I would speak to the height issue. I think the height issue is probably similarly can be categorized with the placement of the structure behind versus, or in front of the primary versus behind. The topography is the limiting factor. You can mitigate the height by going back and down the hill if you would, but that topography then adds to some other complexities in the construction design, proper location, wetland or soils issues and things. So I'm not sure it's inconsistent with the same findings of fact on the attributes of the parcel that just prevent you from being able to make a reasonable use in that spot. Mr. Yeager.
Yeah, just to play off your, thank you, Mr. Chair, just to play off your point here, it's the building height that had me most concerned with this. I think that I would have a much different opinion if it were in a traditional neighborhood where those belt lines of soffit and fascia are really well established. We've seen a few examples, particularly in North Brainerd or Northeast, where accessory structures with really tall sidewalls have been built and they just don't look great sitting next to those other traditional buildings. But because of the almost what I would call a rural nature of this, I drove by this site. I think I'm less concerned with that, and I do understand, you know, I have clients sit in front of me every day. Everything we own is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, so I do understand the plight with taller garage doors, taller sidewalls, and that type of thing. So I think we just, as a group, want to be, I would encourage us as a group to be careful about this building height accessory structure, especially in the other neighborhoods like I discussed. But here, to me, I think it's probably a good fit for the surroundings. So I have less of an issue with it here. So that's where I'm at. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yeager. Other comments?
I'll make a comment too. So the garden living zoning, that was similar to kind of my line of thinking on this when I drove by as well. You know, I feel like that we designed, or we kind of created this garden living zoning to allow for a little bit more leeway, a little bit more flexibility. So I was trying to, that's, like, I wanted to see how we could make this happen, but I'm trying to come up with a technical way to, you know, make sure that's all right. And I guess the topography might be that way to do that. Topography poses that practical difficulty. Because I did want to provide a little bit of flexibility and more leeway with, you know, considering that it was the garden living zoning.
Thank you, Mr. Erickson. Other comments? Discussion? Hearing none, I would be looking for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'll take a stab at it. So I recommend approval of the variance request to place the proposed detached garage in front of the primary structure, 52 feet from the property line, due to the wetlands in the rear and the topography issues in the rear, as well as allow for the additional increase in height, also citing the rear topography issues.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second, Yeager.
So we have a motion by Erickson, second by Yeager. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Director Krambik, can you call roll, please?
Gorham.
Yes.
Calroos. Yeager.
Yes.
Erickson.
Yes.
Marone. Woodward.
Yes.
Duval.
Yes, that motion carries. Can you inform the applicant the next steps, please, James?
Yeah, so final vote for the variance request, or both variance requests, will be heard by the city council at the next meeting on October 3rd, 7:30 here in the council chambers.
All right, so with that, we are now at item 7, public forum. This is time allocated for citizens to bring matters not on the agenda to the attention of the planning commission, and time limits may be imposed, and we lost our public. We'll open the public hearing at 8:10, and anyone online, Brent? All right, well, seeing that no one's here, we will end the public hearing forum, and we will move to the Community Development Director's report. James, tell us what's happening.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I did want to update the Planning Commission on the new park along the river. So I did talk to our city engineer today, and actually did get a chance to overlook the property. I was over at the HRA complex and got to see some of the improvements that have been made. I did see the cantilever pier was in, some of the walkways were in. Also, the retaining walls for the amphitheater were in as well. Some of the changes that have been made, there's been many changes kind of throughout this process here from the original concept. Originally, it was going to have a kind of a prefab bathroom. I believe that's now going to be more of a custom type project, as well as an increase in amphitheater size, and then also walkway down to the kayak launch. So to date, much of the street reconstruction, structural foundations, and retaining wall work has been complete. City engineer did tell me due to some of the supply chain issues, delays have been encountered for some of the elements of the facility. The project is still expected to be mainly completed in November, with some of the turf establishment work to occur in the spring of 2023. So that's an update on the new park. Also wanted to mention a lot of things going on downtown this Saturday. So we have a Touch a Truck event along Laurel Street that's going to be shutting down Laurel Street for a few hours for kids to come and enjoy getting into fire trucks and different city vehicles and honking horns, and nice event. So Touch a Truck from 10 to 12. There's also a Flapjack Festival happening downtown as well along Front Street. I believe that's from 11 to 2 or 11 to 3. And then there's also a skate park closure along Front Street as well. There'll be, I think there's some barbecues there, as well as some different skate events. So a lot happening downtown this Saturday, so come check it out.
Thank you, James. Any questions for James?
Well, the bigger question is, are we going to have a project management meeting again on this? It seems like it's kind of been time. Is the project management team for for Mississippi Landing going to ever meet again, or?
I could ask the city engineer that.
That'd be nice to know.
Okay.
And I could ask 14 questions, but I will only ask one. Define increase in amphitheater.
You know, I would have to check with him on that as well.
Okay. I think we need a meeting.
Yep.
All right, that's all I got.
Any other questions for the director? Hearing none, we're at item 9, commissioner questions and comments.
Nothing to add.
Nothing to add.
Mr. Erickson.
James said the 3 events downtown, encourage people to go out and enjoy that. And I was racking my brain, I was forgetting one of them, so I'm glad you said all 3. Thank you.
One item, James, I think in the exercise of preparing for this month's meeting, I noticed in the table of uses that the section reference column, there's some typos and errors in that, pointing you in different places. So the outdoor storage is pointing at 515-226 as opposed to 320, whatever it is. And there's other examples in there. If we have the capacity, staff time or intern time or whatever to maybe go through, this is like our key entry point into the code. And so it would be really nice to make sure that we've got those kinds of loose ends
Certainly.
corrected. So maybe take a look at that as an opportunity when you have some free staff time someplace that we could direct, and that could be in 2024 for all we know. But other than that, you know, I think this was a busy night. Thank you, fellow commissioners, on that, and I think that's all I've got. So I am looking for a motion to adjourn because someone has a mandolin ready to go.
Motion to adjourn, Quorum.
Second.
All right, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. We are adjourned. Are you going to put that